So we're going to be using this old hinge plate, and it's beginning to look a little familiar to you by now. But what we're going to try to do is we're going to use some patterns in here. First, linear patterns, linear sketch patterns, and then circular sketch patterns in order to put some additional features into this. And the desire with using patterns is we're going to take existing model geometry and be able to pattern that across our design. So if you look at our other model that we have in here, what we're going to do is we're going to try to get something that looks like this. So right now we have our hinge round here on the left hand side of our hinge plate. And what we want to do with that hinge round is be able to put in these holes. So we're going to have 4 holes altogether. 1, 2, 3, 4. And essentially it's going to be creating what looks like 8 features over here on the left hand side, going between holes and then the hinge round back to a hole again and another hinge round after that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a cut here, and then with the linear sketch pattern we're going to take that that square, that rectangle that's going to define this cut here, and pattern it to 1/2 inch all the way down to the end of our hinge plate. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and go to our top plane, and let's go ahead and go normal to that, and we're going to take a look at that. So if we click on the top plane, go over here to our view orientation, let's go ahead and scroll down to the normal button. And we're going to take a look at it here. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and open up existing sketch that we have in here, which is going to be that sketch 1. We're not going to necessarily open it up, but we definitely want to show it. So we're going to right click on that, and we're going to tell it to show, because we're going to borrow some of the sketch geometry in order to put this together. So with that showing, we're going to go to sketch, we're going to go to corner rectangle, we're going to start over here in the corner. We're going to go ahead and start on this surface over here in order to put that together. And escape once if you accidentally put your cursor already down. But right click again and get you right back into that command. So just looking for geometry to sketch from. We're going to go ahead and start with that point over here. Sketch it over here. If we can pick up that, you can see that orange selection of that edge. We're going to go ahead and try to pick that up. And you can see the preview of what we're going to be getting in regard to the sketch relationship, which is going to be a coincident relationship, and we're going to go ahead and use that. So now that we have that in place, we have a coincident relationship over here, coincident relationship in the lower right hand side, 2 verticals and 2 horizontals, and it's almost fully defined. What's not defined over here is the length of that. So we're going to go ahead and put a dimension on that, a smart dimension of a 1/2 inch, so 0.5. And now we're going to go ahead and cut that. So we're going to go to Features, go to Extruded Cut. I'm going to go to Through All. And if we go to the green check mark, you'll notice we still have a little piece in here. So what we had in here is we started from that plane. We did Through All, which went through all down to the bottom. What we really want to do is we want to take that feature and we want to do Through All in 2 directions, both directions. And what that does is it's going to open up our direction number 2 down here when we do that. Let's go to Through All both, and it's going to go ahead and check mark that, and it's going to go Through All on the other side too. So a little bit of time saver. You make one selection here instead of having to come down here and check that box and go to Through All over here too. So you save yourself a few steps. Go to the green check mark, and now we have that in place. So let's go ahead and go to the isometric view and take a look at that from the very top, and we'll go on to the next step. Alrighty, so let's tidy this up a little bit. Let's take our cut extrude and rename that to something that's a little bit more descriptive. We're going to call it our hinge cut. And now let's go into our sketch 5. Let's right click on that and go to Edit Sketch. And let's go normal too. So if we go up here to our view orientation and go to the normal 2 button, now we can see that. So a very simple sketch. What we're going to do is we're going to pattern that going down the ridge of our hinge round that we have. So right now it's a 1/2 inch, and this is all going to be 4 inches. So if you think about it, we have a 4-unit cycle that goes down this. So we're going to alternate between a cut, and then a round, and then a cut, and then a round, and then a cut again. And then we're going to continue that all the way to the end. So if you think about this, the cycle repeats itself after about 1 inch. So one way to do that is we could do that as a feature, but I'm going to show you how to do that as a sketch first. We can go up here to our Sketch tab. On our Command Manager, go over here to Linear Sketch Pattern. We're going to go ahead and click on that, and it automatically opens up a dialog box over here on the left-hand side in our Properties Manager. And right now it's suggesting how we want to put that together. So right now it's giving us an X and Y axis. Right away, right out of the box is showing us what we can do. We could also pick items over here in the modeling area in order to define that. But I like the idea that it gives us these axes to start with. But if you think about the x-axis and you think about what we have down here, we're essentially sketching on the x and the z-axis here. So the y-axis probably is not going to help us very much. The z-axis might. But if this were actually the z-axis, we might want to consider that. Go up here and make that instance 1. Right now we just have one instance of this. And maybe make this one 2 down here. So let's do this. Instead of choosing the axes that are selected for us, let's go ahead and choose our own. So this is already open. We have a light blue dialog box which is open, our selection box. We're going to go ahead and click on that edge up here. We can very easily select this edge over here too. What we want to do is select an edge where it can pattern along. So right now the distance between, as we work our way from the top to the bottom, right now the distance between that is 1/10 of an inch, which isn't much. And just for the fun of it, so we can get a preview of this as we go along, let's just jump down here to Entities to Pattern and click on all these entities down here. So you can get an idea what some of the selections are going to do when we make our choices down here. So 1/10 of an inch, you can actually see it's actually going in the wrong direction down here. So we're going to scoot out a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and change the direction. So we're going to go off in this direction actually. And you can barely see it, but there is an arrow in here, a gray arrow. If you click on that, that also gives it the capacity to change the direction. So we want to go up in this direction. And the spacing is going to be, we want to repeat the cycle every inch. So we're going to go ahead and type in 1 over here. And just take our cursor, maybe just rest it over here temporarily in the instances box. So right now it's got 2 instances of the pattern we want to measure, we want to pattern out. So we're going to actually type in 4 in here. So we want to have 4 to go all the way around. So let's go ahead and click inside of the modeling area. Now you can see the preview of what we're going to get. So from the top we chose that edge, 1 inch for the spacing. We have 4 instances down here, and between this is a box, checkbox for dimension X spacing, or a dimension spacing between us, not necessarily along the x-axis. But let's go ahead and put a dimension between that. So let's put a dimension. I think it's going to put a dimension between this line here and where that line begins the next portion of that cycle. And it's going to be 1 inch. So we're going to go ahead and put that dimension in here. If we're going to go down here to direction 2, quite literally we can pattern this out kind of like a checkerboard if we wanted to do that and define a different direction, but we're only going to be going off in a linear direction here rather than a matrix. So we're not going to put anything in here, but we could also put in similar values down here. Right now the instance down here is just 1, so if it's going to go off in the X direction or a different direction, we still only have 1 of that, so it's okay. There's nothing up here where you can like uncheck it to get that gray in the background. If you just have 1 instance in here, it's not going to change anything. So we also have a desire in here to maybe change the angle in here too, if we didn't define it in other ways. But we'll cover that at a different time. So entities to pattern, that's already selected, so it looks like we're ready to go. So if we go to the green check mark in here, now we can see what we do. So because we had checked that dimension in here for the linear pattern to put a dimension on that cycle, it put in that 1 inch dimension, so it actually comes to us fully defined and ready to go. So now that we have that in place, if we go to rebuild, now you can see our pattern, and you also will see an instance number down here too. So with that instance number, we could actually change it. We could actually double click on that number instead of having to go into the sketch itself and change that. So let's change that to 3 just for the fun of it and see what that does. And if we rebuild that, now we're only going to get 3. 1, 2, and 3 in here, and the one that cuts this one in half is gone. So we can change that back to 4, change it to 5 if we want to do that. We can change this too. We can change that dimension without having to go into the sketch. Kind of a convenient to do that. It remains visible for a while. If we want to make that 3/4 of an inch, now you can see what our cuts look like there. So let's go ahead and bring that up to the values that we're looking for. And that's the way you do it. So the linear sketch pattern allows you to take an existing sketch geometry and pattern that within the same sketch. If you go in here to a hinge cut, you see nothing different about sketch 5. It looks the same. The wording on the outside of the letters associated with that to say sketch 5 haven't changed. And if you were to right click and go inside of that, you can see what it did. You still have that pattern in here. But outside of that, if we rebuild that, we have still these 2 sketch elements in here that we can change to make modifications to that. If we go back to our hinge cut, sketch 5, and take a look at that, what we've done, we have a new sketch entity, a new sketch relation, I should say. And if you rush your cursor over that, it tells you what it is. It's a pattern line relationship. And it tells you what number it is too. So it's taking line number 2, which is this line down here, and it's patterning that up there, and it's renaming it to number 10, or renaming it to number 14, and so on and so forth. And if we were to take that sketch relation and delete it, it deletes all of them, and now you have this full flexibility in here of all these items in here. So don't want to do that. The nice thing about this feature, and I'm doing Control-Z on the keyboard, is that with just 2 dimensions in here, this dimension over here and the instance number over here, and with that linear pattern sketch relation, that pattern sketch relation in here, it fully defines that sketch. Pretty quick and easy. And if we were to rebuild that, now we're all set to go. Okay, so we're going to do something similar, something that's a little bit different. It's going to be the circular sketch pattern, and as it implies, what we're going to be doing is we're going to circulate some sketch elements around a center of something, which is right now we're going to go ahead and click on this point over here, which is the center of the base feature of our hinge plate. Now conceivably we could take these cuts that we have in here and rotate these cuts around our model too, both in the back and then the right side of our hinge plate. But because we don't have that hinge round back here, we'd be circulating cuts where we don't need to cut. So we're going to put in a whole new feature in here. So we're going to go ahead and put in a circle in here. Now let's make sure we have this normal too, and I think you know how to do that by now, but I have it as a shortcut key and on my keyboard, which allows me to do that. And of course, when you're normal to something here, it allows you to pick up that sketch geometry and that's in the background. So you might find that to be a lot more convenient when you start doing a lot of sketch modeling. So we're going to go up here to the Sketch tab. We're going to go ahead and go to Circle, and we're going to go ahead and choose that surface in here and then sketch out a circle. We probably should have selected that surface first, but let's go ahead and rotate that around to make sure it's in the right place. Let's take that circle, let's go ahead and drop it on that line in here. Let's put a dimension on that and kind of define this a little bit better. And let's go ahead and select just one element. I was trying to select more than one. But 0.4 is going to be that value for the diameter, and let's go ahead and select between the circle and that edge over here. We're going to make that maybe 0.7. So now we're going to put in one additional dimension in here, and that's going to be a dimension between the circle and this point in here. So it'll become apparent later what that's going to do. But what we want to do is we want to have some sort of reference in here to understand how the circular sketch pattern actually works. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And it's given us a couple different options. We can go horizontal or vertical. What we want to do is go to the 45-degree diagonal in here. So once you get that orientation in there, right click on the mouse, you see that blue button? Let's go ahead and drop that into place with the left mouse button. And then you get this warning up here. What we want to do is we want to make that dimension driven. It's already fully defined in here. If we put more dimensions in there, it's not going to like us. So we're going to go to OK. So now we have those dimensions in place. If we do escape once, now you can see this is gray in the background. We're going to use that for reference here in a bit. And this circle is already defined by the existing geometry that we have. Alrighty, before we actually do a feature here, let's go ahead and do our pattern first. What we're going to do is we're going to pattern the circle around this point over here. So let's just get started. Let's go up here to our Sketch tab, go over here to Linear Sketch Pattern, and actually choose the item that's just below that. If you go to the down arrow and choose Circular Sketch Pattern. So typically we start with the Properties Manager from the top and work our way down to the bottom, but it's a little bit more fun and productive if you go down here to Entities to Pattern and select that first. So let's go ahead and select inside of that. It turns pink, but that's an old selection color. But we're going to go ahead and click on that, and what it does is it helps fill in the blanks from the top going down. So let's see what it's choosing to do for us here. So right now it's choosing a parameter, which is going to be that point in the center of our base feature for our hinge plate. It's going to go ahead and choose that. The X and Y offset is not really the X and Y as you see in a triad here. It may be, but typically it's the X direction going off here as you could think about the Cartesian coordinate system, and then the Y direction going up over here. So is how it appears on the screen is how it's orienting itself here. So for the offsets right now it's 0, but if we were to put in something like maybe 0.5 inches in the X and maybe 0.2 inches on the Y, you can see that it's going to do that offset, but we're going to keep that at 0. And those are linked to some features that are, some selections that are available a little bit lower from here. So for 360 degrees, it's considering we want equal spacing going around here. So it's got that check mark, that box checked. For instances, we can make that maybe 6. If you want to do that, you can see how that fills in. And we can also change that value here. Instead of 360, we can make that 270. So now it's going to take those 6 circles and pattern them around, but stop at 270. So it's going to go between 0, 90, 180, and 270 here and fill in 6 equal space holes. So for now, right now we have it equal spacing, but we can go down here and dimension angular spacing if we want to do that. What that's going to do is it's going to dimension between like the first and second instance here, and maybe more, and put in that angular dimension, which is probably going to be, well, it's going to be 270 divided by 6, whatever that might be. So we're going to go to equal spacing and go back over there. And then we're going to display the instance count just like we did with the linear sketch pattern. So we want to see that value in here. Right now that value is going to be 6. This diameter dimension in here is going to be the very same dimension that you see over here. I'm going to move that dialog box out of the way. Now we put in here, and that's essentially the diameter of where that circle is going to be from where it's going to be patterned. So it's going to be this exact same number. If we change that number to like maybe 2, now you can see what that does. What that does is it provides an offset. So now the values up here for the X and Y offsets up here have changed too. So we can get that back to the original value. We're going to make that 0 and make this one 0 too. Now we can see what that's going to be. And at 45 degrees, let's just change that to see what that does. If we make that maybe 30 degrees, now you can see what it does. It's an angle between this line and maybe a virtual line of what would be perceived to be the x-axis down here. It's not going to dimension that for us, but you know, you can see what it does. But what we really want to do is take that back to 45 degrees and really put it on that line. So we have reference geometry here in the background that we could use to help define that later if we need to do that. Okay, so let's talk about a few more options in here. Right now the way we have it is we have a 270 degree circle in here, and it's going to put in 6 different circle instances inside of this, including the first one. So it's going to fit that all within 270 degrees. What you're seeing in here is some blue lines in here which denote what the radius of our circle that the pattern is going to be put on. You have an arrow in here which tells us where that pattern is going to stop. So that stops right at the 270 mark. We also have an arrow in here too, which allows us to reverse the direction. So now the stop arrow is up here. Now it's over here. So if you do it this way, it's going to start over here at 0 and go to 90, 180, and 270 over here. But let's go back to the original way, and we could also do the same thing over here by going to parameters and changing the direction there too. So let's do this. Let's go down to equal spacing and like unclick that, or maybe go down here to dimension angular spacing. If we do that, now we're going to get an implied angle of 54 degrees in here between this first and second instance. And if we were to take out that second instance in here, we're going to lose that angle. I'm going to go ahead and keep that in here, and I'm going to show you how to do that. One more thing before we go down here to instances to skip, which is like closed. We're going to get to that in a minute. We also have a dialog box up here which we can change some of the parameters that we see over here in a properties manager. So instead of instances, if we want to do 7 perhaps, we can put that in here. So now the angles are going to be 51.43. Maybe 5 would be good. So let's go back in there and put in 5 and see what that does. So it's still 54.3. But spacing, we can change that to maybe 60 degrees. 30 degrees between the spacing, and now you can see what that does. So you don't have all the options that you have over here, but you do have some, and you can make changes to those. So instead of 30 degrees, let's make that 50 degrees and see what that does. So 5 instances at 50 degrees, and it's going to put a 50 degree angle between our first and second instance when we put that in place. So instances to skip over here in our properties manager. If we were to open that up, you can click inside of that, or maybe take that pull down arrow and open that up here and click inside of that, so it gives us the capacity to go over here and make a selection. We're going to select some instances to skip. So you'll notice that inside of these preview circles over here you have a red dot. If you were to click on that red dot, it turns orange and the preview disappears. Same thing over here. If you were to click on that, that's our instance number 5. Sometimes if it doesn't disappear right away, you kind of have to open up your dialog box, your selection box over here in your property manager to get that. But if you want it to come back, right now it's a green arrow because it's showing the very end of that line. We could just go ahead and click that back and click the orange dot otherwise, and it comes back. So let's take this one and just kind of get rid of it. It's orange, it's not really there, but if you were to click inside of the instances to skip, it's there. So now instance number 4 is being skipped. So if you think about this being 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, and then 5 total. So one thing to note here too is that instances to skip is a dialog box in the linear sketch pattern. I didn't show it to you because it was kind of off the screen a little bit, but here it's a good way to demonstrate it, and it's got the same thing too. We got the red dots, alternating red dots and orange dots, and then a preview that appears and disappears too. So now that we have this all set, and make sure we have it all set, go to the green check mark, because once you go to the green check mark, you ain't coming back. So if I click on that, now we have that in place. And you'll notice that we have these blue circles in here. The first instance is fully defined, but these other ones aren't. So typical of trying to find out what sort of freedoms you have with your sketches that aren't fully defined is take that circle point in the middle of that circle, or any point, and just move that around. So if you move that around, you can see what we need to do. And if you remember us talking about this line in here, we can make a relationship between that line and the existing sketch line in the background. And with the control key depressed, we can make that collinear. Once it's collinear, it's fully defined. And now we have that sketch relation that we're familiar with, the pattern sketch relation. And let's talk about that being arc number 3, and then this pattern down here is going to be arc number 2, or instance number 2, and so on and so forth. If you're to get rid of those, it's going to get rid of all 4 of them, and then then they're going to be free floating circles. And here's that degree dimension that we see between these 2 lines. That was put in there as part of that circular sketch pattern. And if we deleted this or didn't put in that that second instance in here, then we'd have to try to define that. So if we took that line out, if that line wasn't in there, then we'd have to actually establish that line and make that relationship ourselves. So the first one was 50, but we could do this. We can put in a smart dimension between this line and that line and do exactly what the circular sketch pattern did for us, and put in 100 degrees, and it gets it fully defined. So let's say we want to bring back this instance over here, instance number 4. Well, where is it? What do we do? I mean, that's the biggest drawback of the circular and linear sketch pattern, is that you can't go back and make modifications. It's just a facilitator and just puts extra sketch elements into your sketch. But if you want to bring back that instance, then you're going to have to sketch that circle out, make it equal to this circle, make it equal distance from the center over here to this line, and then put a dimension between that line, those 2 lines, an angular dimension of 50 degrees. That gets that back. So if you think about that, a feature pattern is actually a lot more convenient than a sketch pattern, but there are advantages to either one. Alright, so now that we have our sketch elements in here and they're fully defined, now we can do something with it, and let's go ahead and extrude it. Let's go ahead and do an extrude cut, actually. So let's go up here to Features, Extruded Cut, Through Wall, green check mark, and now we have that in place. So it kind of looks like Swiss cheese in a way, but there's our new hinge plate. And it's not going to be part of the final hinge plate, but it's a demonstration to how you could use linear and circular sketch patterns to help facilitate getting those extra sketch entities in here in order to do your features.